I just want to know because I want to make sure that you guys can review everything. I already have questions on YouTube. Is it possible to go from DR0 to DR40 in 3 to 4 months? Yes, it is, but it's a lot of link building. I am going to do Q&A at the end, by the way. So if you have any questions about the post or something else, you can drop them in the chat right now, and I will be reviewing all the questions, but kind of like want to go through the agenda first for the people that came for that, and then after that, if you want to stay, then I'll do Q&A. So that is what we're going to do. We are starting in 30 seconds. Okay, I'm going to start actually. So first of all, how do you get access to the new blog post so that we can talk about the same thing here? We're going to talk about this new blog post we just released. So I'm going to switch to my browser view here. And the way you see it is simply you click on the little bell here on Authority Hacker, and here, this is our featured post, but then the second one is the new post. So you click here. Suppose that I did not write, it's suppose that Misha wrote. I did edit it quite heavily, to be frank. So I got quite involved in this, but I did not write this post. So we're still gonna talk about the data and all that stuff. And yeah, so let's first start with the beginning of the post where we essentially get that question all the time, and people are asking this question all the freaking time on all the Facebook groups, like how long does it take to rank, etc. And I think that the first thing I want to start this stream with is that ranking is almost never a factor of time. If the New York Times was launching a new website today and they were able to use the power of the New York Times to reach out to all these sites that they can get links from, this site would rank really, really quickly. Like in a matter of weeks, it would probably rank for very competitive queries. Whereas if you're nobody and you're starting to launch a website and you have no way to acquire the links, etc., then it's going to be quite difficult and it's going to take you a long time to rank for competitive queries. So that question, how long does it take to rank, is a question a lot of people ask, which is why we wrote this blog post. We do SEO, right? We're trying to rank for that query. But at the same time, I think it's kind of like the same question as if you exercise, like people go to the gym for the first time and they're asking, oh, how long is this gonna take for me to be big and have muscles? Well, if you don't work out, never. And then if you do stuff, then depending on what you did, the result is going to vary. Well, the answer on how long does it take to rank is very, very similar to how long does it take to grow muscles. Actually, I have a bit of an OCD here. I'm just gonna fix the stream a little bit because, yeah, this is better. Sorry, just a little bit of OCD. So yeah, it's going to vary massively on what you do. And I think a lot of beginners are making that mistake of thinking that it is a function of time. It's not a function of time. It's a function of like how much shit you can get done. And the data is going to back that up actually as we go through this, right? So before we actually jump into our blog post, I want to jump into Ahrefs' blog post, and we gave them a link, by the way, because they actually did a blog post about this in 2017. Actually, Tim did it at the time when Tim was still writing for the blog. He did that, and there was some interesting stuff in the Ahrefs blog post. The first thing that was quite interesting is that most pages on page 1 were 3+ years old, right? And I mean, you see the number of days, right? 365 is 1 year. So you can see like number 1 average is almost like 950 days, which is, yeah, like a little bit under 3 years. And then you can see it decreases a little bit as you go down in rankings, but overall, it's not a lot of new pages on page 1. And it's something that is the first stat that Ahrefs found, and you'll see that we confirmed that data with our stuff, actually. The second thing that I wanted to talk about was that it seemed like domain rating, domain authority, essentially, mattered when it came to getting rankings. And I think it's quite important. So basically, that's why you want to get your DR higher up in your page, and that's kind of like what Matt Diggity calls authority mode. It's when you publish and your stuff starts ranking without you really trying to do anything. Just it happens. If the page is well optimized, you end up ranking. And essentially, that's what Ahrefs is showing in this graph. It's like, well, the higher your DR, the more pages you will get in the top 10 within the first year of the page being published. So the low DR pool had only 3% of their new pages showing up on page 1, essentially, while the high DR pool had 10% of their pages showing up on page 1. And that's why when you get a fair amount of authority, let me check actually, I get a bit of a frame drop, I think. So let me just check that. I think it's Facebook actually. We're back. Okay. So if you have a fair amount of authority, essentially that's why Matt says that, and we do that as well with our site that get over 60 DR type thing, is publish a lot, because it becomes a number game. But when 10% of your pages hit page 1 within 1 year without you really trying, then usually that page makes more than, you know, the money of the pages that don't end up ranking on page 1. And so the game when you have a high authority site is to publish a lot, which is essentially the whole game behind authority sites. But it's nice to see that confirmed with the data, that if you build up your DR, you will rank higher faster without actually trying. Let me just take my notes. One thing that was interesting as well to me is this graph here. So they essentially show you how many days for the 5.7% of pages that ended up ranking on page 1 within the year, how much time did it take? And what was interesting is, like, you would expect that it would be a function of time where the 305 to 365 days, so like this section here, would actually be the one that has the most pages because they had the most time, right? So you imagine if time is a function, then normally that section should be the highest, then second highest, third highest, fourth highest, fifth highest, and first, right? That's not the case actually. And I think this graph confirms that ranking is not a function of time. It shows you that actually the pages that ended up ranking on page 1 were pages that they ended up ranking within essentially 2 to 6 months. 2 to 6 months seems to be the sweet spot. If your page hasn't made it on page 1 by that time, the chances to get on page 1 is actually fairly low. Even if you're a high DR site, it's only like 6% and 6.7%. So it's really not a lot. The bulk of the pages, you can see like 4, 5, 6. So it's basically 70% of pages making on page 1 between day 60 and day 182. So between month 2 and month 6, which to me was quite interesting, and I think proved the fact that it's not a linear function of time. Otherwise, this is not what this graph would look like, which was quite interesting for me. And then the other quite interesting thing actually was that when you check the ranking this one. When you check the ranking performance of the pages, essentially most of the pages that end up ranking on page 1, they were ranking for low volume keywords. They were like low volume keywords, so less than 1,000 searches per month. And then even for the high authority, like for everyone, like if you want to rank for a big keyword, essentially it's almost impossible to rank within 1 year, even if you do really well. And I think it's possible. Like one thing to remember is that all these stats that you're seeing is just like Ahrefs scraping data. And what that means is that it's including sites that do good SEO, but it's also including sites that are not even trying. They just end up ranking because they're high authority or whatever. And I think that works pretty well for them. And so as a result, I think by doing good SEO, you can skew this data, even if it's 0.3%. If you're a good SEO ranking for a high volume, difficult keyword within a year, I don't personally, if I was looking at that keyword and taking care of it, it would be a lot higher than 0.3%. It would probably be like 25 to 40% maybe. So if you do a good job at SEO, and if you get links, and if you understand the metrics that you need to work on, you can skew this data, but these are the averages basically. So that was quite interesting to me. I think that's most of what I wanted to highlight from this post before I jump into ours, because we will see what gets confirmed and what gets not so confirmed from the data we've done. So let me check my notes. Yes, so I'm gonna skip the TLDR because essentially it is useful if you are not reading this, but we're like going through this together basically. So the first thing for a page to rank, ta-da, is to be indexed in Google, right? And if you're low authority site, it's not that obvious, especially if you don't have a sitemap submitted in Google Webmasters Console or something. For us, every time we actually publish a page, we actually throw it in that box in Google Search Console, and then we'll request indexing basically. So like if I take that URL, for example, let's say I pasted this. And then if it would show me that it's not on Google because that is like a new URL. If I just posted, I would just click on request indexing. And usually when we do that, our content is indexed within like 3 to 5 minutes, and actually often ranks on page 1 doing that basically. So the first thing you need to do is make sure that your content is indexed. Also, there are a lot of scrapers out there these days, so you need to be a little careful when you publish new content. If people are scraping your site and big authority sites are scraping your site, it's rare, but it's happened that they actually stole the rankings from websites. So you need to be a little bit careful of that. So that's the first thing I wanted to say. You need to be indexed, basically. And actually, let me actually go back a little bit, because I wanted to share something a little bit off topic, but quite interesting. It's so for us, the curve of new post, when we publish a new post, is quite interesting. Like, we target a keyword, and then it often like does really well quite right away. So it's like, I've actually done 2 case studies on Facebook. You can follow me on Facebook, by the way. I do this kind of like case studies with people who follow me, so I have like some kind of like following thing, and I do some public posts, etc. And I did it for 2 queries. I did one in January 2019, sorry, for the keyword Google freshness. And initially, you know, it was ranking like bottom of page 1, something like this. And basically, as I asked people to click on it, eventually it got number 1. And we are not number 1 anymore, but we did maintain the number 1 ranking for something like 7 or 8 months or something, just by getting people to click on it. So actually, CTR seems to be like a factor, but as soon as it drops, then your rankings drop. I didn't believe Matt Diggity when he told me, but that's what happened. And I did another one actually in December, so really not that long ago. And we did it for fastest WordPress team, and same thing happened. Like, we were 7th in US when I just indexed it. As I said, I told you it ranks pretty high when we published them. Yeah, there's a lot more comments. I don't know why. Sorry, it wasn't 7th initially. I think it was like 9th or 20, etc. for people. And eventually it went on like between 4th and 7th. And then as soon as the clicks stopped, it just dropped back down. So all of that to say, you need to index your page. That's the first thing to do. And it's kind of interesting the way Google indexes pages. It kind of like tests them, and then it drops them. And then sometimes it brings them back up like a few days later, and sometimes it doesn't. It's kind of like that Google dance for every new blog post. Now let's jump into what the data that we did say. So the thing we've done is we've actually scraped 2 million search results. And the first thing, like, to establish the age, it was tricky because Google does not give you the date. So you can see that, you can see the cache data of it. You know, I have this already, but like if you click here and you click, not similar, that's not what I want. Cached, then you can get the cached version of Google. So they tell you like when they indexed a page, or you can see this page was indexed yesterday at 7:30 p.m. last time. That's the last time they crawled it, essentially. So it is quite interesting to see that, but like to find the actual original published date of a page is not simple. So we actually had to also scrape Wayback Machine, archive.org. So we did that, and out of 2 million search results, we actually managed to get 900,000 URLs original published date. And again, original, I'm gonna say it with quotes because archive.org, Wayback Machine, the crawlers are just not nearly as good as Google is. And so like Google will find the URL way earlier than archive.org or Wayback Machine finds it. But to be honest, if any of you has a better solution to find the original published date of a page, I know Ahrefs shows some in the Content Explorer, but the Content Explorer is like, the index is really small. It wouldn't work for this kind of study. So overall, we've done that. And essentially, we've confirmed something that Ahrefs has shown in this graph here that you see, is that the top ranking spots tend to be much older than, essentially, like, basically you can see like the curve here is insane. And then after that, it kind of like normalizes and it's kind of like more random. But you can clearly see that on page 1 here, there's a correlation. And actually, what we did is we redid that graph, removing the big sites, Amazon, Wikipedia, YouTube, etc., so that we can try to focus on the sites that are more like your site and my site and make it a little bit more realistic, right? And even when we did that, you can still see that curve, right? So like essentially the top 10 is here, and you can still see that the top pages tend to be, I mean, compare that to like page 2, for example. So your page 2 is here, and then your page 1, it's like here. It's a massive difference. And it's quite interesting as well to say that the number 1 tends to be younger than the number 2. And the reason why is because of search intent. Because the number 1 result in Google is often kind of like following different rules, because let's say there's a navigational query, right? If I'm typing authority hacker, even if Neil Patel, who's like much older than us, was talking about us, then we should rank for our own brand query. Therefore, like a lot of other rules like link data and age and all these things do not matter as much. But anyway, that graph confirms that we have seen that, yeah, top ranking URLs tend to be pretty old. I mean, you can see the 1 year line. The 1 year line is like just under that 400 here. It's almost nothing. Oh, can you see my mouse? No, you can't see my mouse. I'm showing stuff with my mouse for like 5 minutes, so I'm sorry. But you can see the 400 line. That's basically the 1 year line. You can see most pages are around 3 years, basically. So that was quite interesting to me to see that. Yeah, page one tends to be filled with older stuff. But what was interesting is that most SEOs are going to look at this graph, and they're going to think, okay, so I need an old page to rank on page one. And again, it's kind of like saying, you know what, I need to have worked out for 5 years and I'll be fucking massive and I have huge arms or something like that. And it's not necessarily the truth, because if you only go to the gym once a week, then it's quite unlikely you look a lot better than you used to when you just started. And what we did then is we actually looked at the median amount of referring domains per domain age in that index. So you can see the numbers on the x-axis are actually the years. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then this is the number of referring domains on the left. And you see that essentially the older a URL is, the more link it has. And so it's kind of like a chicken or the egg question. Is the age influencing the links, or are the links like you know what I mean? Or is it because the page ranks higher because it's older that it's getting more links, right? So it's hard to tell. You know, given the other data studies that we've done in the past, I would say it's probably the links that influenced. I mean, essentially the age of the URL that influenced the amount of links that it gets because it had more time to get links. And so therefore, because it has more links, and links are a well-known ranking factor, then essentially that's why the pages are ranking. So that's what I come back to when I showed you the Ahrefs data that showed that, you know, 0.3% chances of essentially ranking for high competition, high volume keyword within 1 year. That's probably because these pages have a lot of links, and if I'm a really good link builder, then I'm probably able to like jump in there much faster with a much higher chance, right? So let me just jump on my notes quickly to just check what I wanted to talk about next. Another thing that, okay, I wanted to show that. Another thing that influences page one, and that will influence this data in these rankings that, you know, you need to take with a grain of salt, is recency of events and relevancy of events. So what I did to illustrate that is I Googled China, right? And if I Google China right now, okay, I get, if we ignore everything, let's ignore the news, let's ignore YouTube, let's ignore all the sites, let's just look at the organic results, right? If I Google China right now, okay, I get Wikipedia first, but like my third result is something about that new virus. My fourth result is about that virus as well. Fifth result is about that virus as well. So you essentially have half the SERPs with a link that is relevant to the actual news right now. And so when we scrape these results, some of these queries are going to work that way. There will be, you know, if AMD releases a new microprocessor, then, you know, some of this stuff is going to jump up and essentially change these things. If there is an update for software, if there's anything like that, then it's going to change the results. So like the stats that we gave you, they include all of that, meaning that you have even less chances actually to rank on top of Google because you need to count for this kind of like relevant type of results that come with the news, essentially. Let me show you, check one thing. Is there any question, by the way? If you guys have any questions, I'm going to go through the questions at the end. So we're actually almost done. It's not a very long one. It's just a quick live to hang out. Yeah, okay. The last thing I wanted to share, actually, like one of the last main thing. So this was like not super interesting, this one. But I think, so yeah, we checked actually the organic traffic against the age of the URL, and essentially it follows, it's exactly the same graph as the links, right? You can see the correlation. This is the links. Well, essentially, you know, 1 year old average median number of link is like 40, then it's like 52, then it's like 57, 53, 54, whatever. And you can see that the organic traffic is pretty much following this graph. So it shows you that links are probably the factor here, not the edge of the page, right? But the one thing that we noticed is I asked Michel to look at the HTML of the page and the schema data to find when the page was last updated, because there was a lot of pages that maybe have been indexed for the first time like 5, 6, 7 years ago, but have actually been updated in the last 6 weeks or something. So I wanted to kind of like compare that, and that's this graph essentially. This graph shows you the position on Google here, so we go all the way to 100, and it shows you the number of days since the last update. And what's very interesting is the top spots. Like the top 3 spots are clear outliers in that study here. You can see essentially the top 3 spots on median on 900,000 search results. The median number is below 1 year. Like the 1 year is like here. So essentially most of page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, the top 7 spots on a search result, over 900,000 results, has been updated within the last year. So if you have a page that you're complaining that is not ranking, ask yourself, when was the last time you updated it? It seems like updating pages is kind of, updating old pages is the absolute killer thing to do in SEO right now. Essentially that was kind of like what I wanted to conclude on, because then it's just the conclusion of the post. By the way, you should go and read it. I'm not giving you everything here. I'm just going through the quick data and just showing you all that stuff. But what's the meta? Meta stands for most effective tactic available. It's an esport term, like for people who play video games. But I think it's very relevant for SEO as well. Like, what is the most efficient thing to do today? Claiming your URLs early, I think, is a big deal. I think if you are able to, take the URLs the keywords that you will want to rank eventually, you can let them age essentially. And if I'm wrong, let's say age is actually a factor, well, you're actually gaining time on this. So like, let's say there's like, you have a list of 300 keywords, but you haven't had time to write content on them. Maybe you should just publish that page and write like 100 words or 200 words on it, and then just re-edit it later, because anyway, you will need to update it to rank. The second thing is building links to your page will bypass time. We can see that in the correlation between the organic traffic and the links. It seems to be more relevant, especially when you look at the Ahrefs data that we saw earlier. Let me get this one. This one shows time is not really a factor. There's no correlation between time and ranking. There's more between the domain rating and the rankings. A domain rating is guided by links. And here we see median number of domains and organic traffic, which shows us a much closer correlation. So essentially, get going building links, because it seems to be a lot more important than the age of your page or the age of your domain or something. And update your pages like every year almost. Like, it's almost like what you have to do. The pages that you care about on Google need a yearly update. Now, I talked about this with Matthew Woodward in the last podcast, so if you haven't seen it, you can go and check that out. But I was asking him, like, when do you update your content? If you're ranking, let's say, top 3 or something, like, do you take the risk to update? Because you might de-optimize it for the keywords or something like this, and it might be an issue. And essentially, he was just telling me, as soon as my rankings start dropping, I go and update my content. But like, if I'm still ranking like quite high and doing quite well, sometimes it's not worth taking that risk. So I think this approach is not a bad one. Obviously, if the content is broken, people can't use it. You should update your content. But overall, if you want to compete for these keywords, the last updating is crazy. This is actually quite crazy how much of a difference it makes. So that's basically the rundown for this blog post. That was like a 20-25 minutes rundown on all these stats and mixing this stuff with Ahrefs. But I think it was quite interesting that sometimes we release these data posts and I feel like it goes over people's head and they're not able to like get the most out of it. So let me know in the chat actually, do you like this kind of like breakdowns? Should I break down the other data posts that we have so that I explain that like in plain English essentially? Yeah, I'm quite curious because that's kind of a new format. If you have questions, drop them in the chat as well. I'm going to be answering them both on YouTube and on Facebook. I actually need to check the YouTube chat. There's a few people. There's 11 people on YouTube. Cool. And there's like quite a few on Facebook. So if you guys have any questions, drop them in the chat right now. I will be answering them. I'll be hanging out for like 5-10 minutes. And if there's no question, I'm going to be closing this live stream soon, and we can do them more regularly if you guys like them. So like, I want to know if you guys like them, because it does take some time to do this. So let me know. Let me check actually. Hi Gael, about your calls. Thank you, Adam. Hi Gael, how do you optimize a campaign for high difficulty keywords? Well, I mean, we saw this in the stats basically. Let me actually, you know what I need to do? I need to use my fancy tech to switch back to my face cam. We saw this in the data. You need a lot of links. Like, links are the #1 factor, together with like having content that matches the search intent. Really, that's the two main things. So that's what I would do it. Is the plant in the back real? No, it's not. No, it's not. That's a great question though. Let me check. Nathan said, Samson, break it down. This is the intermediate, the advanced stuff a lot of us aren't thinking about. Great way for us to level up for H to differentiate. These graphs are amazing. This is manual analysis data. Yes, this is all done by Michel, who spent a lot of time analyzing this data. And yeah, we just build custom scrapers for this kind of posts and get data together. And it's a lot of work. So we hope that you guys appreciate them, because it really, like, some of them are like hundreds of hours to put together. Checking the chat. I see nothing on YouTube. Or I'm not really live on YouTube. I mean, I don't see the live, so let me check that 1 second. Okay, well, if there's no question, I'm gonna close it soon, basically. So I'll actually drop the URL to the blog post on the chat, so you can go check it out as well. Here you go. And then I'll drop it on YouTube as well. I'm on the wrong YouTube channel. Maybe you can subscribe to this one on YouTube. This is our podcast best of channel. The question above. Okay, is it possible to go from DR0 to DR40 in 3 to 4 months? Yes, it is, but you will need to build a lot of links, and you will need to. I mean, you basically need to focus on links that are above DR like 40, basically. Like links above your own DR, your target DR, the ones that will move the needle. So focus on that if you want to get DR40. It's possible, but if you're a newbie, it's going to be difficult. It's like, for us, yes, we can do this. For people who have never done this before, it's going to be a big challenge. Like, you need to pretty much be full-time on this project. Great work. We'll go through the post. Thanks, MC. Thanks, Ross. Okay, so I'll close it in 2 minutes. I'll have Cookie say goodbye to you guys. Cookie, come say goodbye. So you get the dog saying goodbye to you. And thanks for joining. I hope you enjoyed this. How these graphs are created by the Canva or kind of tool? No, it's actually a designer who does it. It's just we have a designer. We have a first version that's like the raw data, and then we kind of like style them to look kind of cool, and that's basically it. Let me check. Okay, all right, I'm closing this. See you later, guys. Thanks for joining in. Bye.